There's going to be no slideshow today. A bit different from my usual, but yeah, I have been very, very, very busy for the past month or so. It's been quite chaotic. Just trying to get everything ready for us coming over to the UK, and I knew I had a men of faith that I had to prepare, and I had a Bible class I had to prepare, I had a youth class I had to prepare, and kind of had to find time in between everything that we were packing and getting ready, documents wise and so forth. And so I needed to find a theme to actually even do a Bible class on. And like most of us do, when you're looking for a theme, you kind of take what's happening in your life at the current stage or something you've just dealt with, or, in maybe the daily readings, or whatever, and you use that as the foundation of your study. And I found it, when we finally arrived here in the UK, only appropriate to use our recent travel as a bit of a foundation to do a study on. And surprisingly, looking into it, you know, traveling has quite a lot of it relates quite well to our faith and our faith journey, and there's this saying that we always had with P2Ps when they come over where it's faith on the move. It's not just staying in your home ecclesia, it's going out into a different country, a different area, and your faith is on the move. So I thought, I would delve a bit deeper into this, and I managed to break it into four main sections. And at the end of the class, I'm going to have four breakout rooms that we can just maybe answer a couple questions among those breakout rooms and come together and discuss what we feel. But that's later's problem. Don't have to stress too much about pens and pencils now. But yeah, so we had quite a long flight coming over from Cape Town to the UK. It was about 18, 17 hours in total, and it's it went quite well. And it's one of those things where some people they love to travel, other people hate traveling. We all kind of have this idea of where we end up being, and we all have a different approach to it. A lot of us just want to get there, and a lot of us say, well, the journey, is the real important part is, how you get there, and all these kind of things I found to be quite relatable in our faith as well. And the first point I want to look at is another saying that I've heard quite often where people say, life is a journey. And, we have this walk that we're on, from when we are born to when we grow older and we make choices. And then we find ourselves, especially us that have joined on tonight, on this walk with God, towards the kingdom. But God often leads us without giving us the full picture. And when we have faith, it means that we are trusting Him step by step as we go. And, just as when we are traveling, we oftentimes will follow a map or an app on our phone that says what the next step is going to be. And we don't always know the full route just yet. When you climb in your car and you put in Google Maps, oh, I want to go to this, it's not telling you the whole route immediately. It says, oh, just turn left and then turn right and then go straight for this many meters. And we kind of have a lot of faith in this GPS to get us to where we need to be. And I feel like God is the same way by design. He wants a relationship with us. He doesn't just want results. He doesn't just immediately want to get us by the end point, by the destination. He calls us to walk with Him daily, to grow independence and to surrender control to Him. The faith journey that we're on, it's about movement and trust and becoming more like Christ along the way. In Genesis 12, we read how God is like this already with Abraham. He calls him to go without knowing the destination. And in Hebrews, Abraham obeys and he lives as a pilgrim. But in Psalms, in Psalm 121, we always assured of God's protection while we are traveling. Abraham didn't come up with this idea to leave home. God called him and he responded. So what we learn is, God initiates this journey with us. John 15, verse 16 says, "You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you." In the same way, in Exodus 3, verse 10, God calls Moses to lead Israel. God is initiating something, and Moses responds. So similarly, in our spiritual journeys, they often begin not with plans that we've made, but kind of with a prompting from God's side, something that happens in our lives that God's put in our pathways that puts us down a certain route. And as I said with Google Maps, sometimes the destination can be a bit unclear. We just kind of see the next step. But in 2 Corinthians 5 or 7, we read and we know it well, for we walk by faith, not by sight. And Proverbs 3 verses 5 to 6 says, "Trust in God even when the path isn't obvious." Again, in Hebrews, it's highlighted that Abraham obeyed even though he did not know where he was going. And it's that kind of faith that kind of runs counter to how we usually plan our lives, right? We, as human beings, especially in today's world with all the calendars and things that we can all link together and sync with each other, we often know exactly where we're going to be, when we're going to be there, who we're going to meet there, how long it's going to last for, how long it's going to take to get there, probably what coffee we're going to order if you're like Stacy and you look at the menu a day ahead. But that's not really what our faith journey is like with God. We do know where we would like to end up, which is the kingdom. But the faith that we have, it's not just the location, it's not just the kingdom. It is this journey that we walk towards it. Philippians 1 verse 6 says, "He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion." 1 Peter 2:11 describes believers as foreigners and exiles. They're always in motion. It gives us this idea of, you don't just arrive and you're at the location and that's now where your faith is. It's like Abraham who lived in tents his whole life after he was called by God. He didn't arrive anywhere in a permanent sense. He was always on the move. And the lesson from that is that our walk with God, it's not about comfort or certainty about, this place that we've arrived at, but it's about continual growth and movement. Luckily, we know, though, that God will provide along the way during this journey. In Deuteronomy 2, verse 7, we read of how God sustained Israel through the 40 years in the desert. In Matthew 6, verse 33, seek his kingdom and all your needs will be met. Again, like I mentioned in Psalm 121, it promises help and protection and strength to the travelers. The journey might be long, but at least it's not unaccompanied. God is with us. Oftentimes, when we are on these personal trips and we're traveling, whether it's car or train or airplane, sometimes plans just fall through. And it's sometimes, maybe we missed the bus or we missed the train or suddenly the car had a flat tire. And it's in those times where we have to adapt and trust in other people and we have to remain calm. And in the same way, in our lives, when things don't go to plan, when things are falling apart or it seem to not be going the way we need them to go, that is where God steps in, as we know. And that is where we are shaped by Him, where our faith grows. So life is a journey. Our faith is a journey. Our faith isn't just, when we've stepped off the plane and we've arrived at our destination. Our faith is the entire trip to that destination with its ups and downs, with its, unpredictable things that might happen and curveballs that we might be thrown. But that is what our faith truly should be, is about how we get to the kingdom. A big thing I learned from this recent trip now that we had is we need to pack light. We need to let go of baggage. And it's important what we pack. As important as what we pack in, it's also important of what we leave behind. And I feel like spiritual growth, it requires us to let go of what slows us down. We aren't meant to carry everything. If you've if you are like me, you've probably been burdened in the past with too many bags. Just this trip now, I was both excited and very, uh, what's the word, nervous when I found out that I was allowed to have two bags and Stacy was allowed to have two bags and Lyle was allowed to have two bags. And we were all allowed to have two pieces of hand luggage. And you think, oh, that's wonderful. We can pack so much stuff until you get to the airport and you realize that, well, those things don't all fit on two trolleys. And now you're in a very difficult situation because you packed too much. You're suddenly burdened with too many bags. And that makes your journey a lot more difficult. And in the same way, in our spiritual lives, we are often carrying things that we don't need to, things we don't need to hold on to, things that are weighing us down, whether it's guilt or regret, fear, or expectations that God never really intended for us to bear. But we all know very well that Jesus offers rest. He invites us to travel light and trust that He will provide for us for the road ahead. So letting go of some baggage is a form of trust and freedom. If I'm packing for a 2-day trip and I only put in 2 days worth of clothing, I am trusting that I am not going to need that extra bit, that extra outfit. I'm trusting that things will go well. I'm trusting that things will go to plan. So when we are trusting in God that things will go according to his plan, we can let go of things that we are holding onto and maybe unnecessarily taking with us. Matthew 11:28 verses 30 is where we read about how Jesus invites the weary to rest in him. And in Philippians 3 verse 13 to 14, it says, forget what is behind and press forward. So we need to forget what is in our past. We need to forget about our worldly lives and things we are clinging onto, the baggage that we are carrying. Because it has, like I said, real repercussions when we are carrying such heavy baggage. Mark 20, verses 21 to 22, we read about the rich young ruler who couldn't let go of his wealth to follow Jesus. He couldn't let go of that baggage he had that he was holding on to with his wealth. In Galatians 5, verse 7, we read how in the letter he says, you were running well. Who hindered you? So we might be on this journey. We might be doing so well that we are, going light, carrying light baggage and doing well on our way towards the kingdom. But something might happen where we suddenly get hindered by a person or something happening in our lives. So in travel and in faith, unnecessary baggage becomes this burden. But Hebrews encourages us to lay it aside because it is hindering our endurance. Hebrews 12 verse 1 says, lay aside every hindrance and sin. But we must be careful and know that it's not just sin that can be weighing us down, because some baggage is emotional. It's not just sinful things. Isaiah 43 verses 18 to 19 says, forget the former things, I am doing a new thing. And don't worry about the past things that you're clinging on to, the worries and concerns of which laws you are, doing and what you are not doing right and doing wrong. It's a new thing that Jesus has brought forward for us that we can focus on. Psalm 55 verse 22 says, cast your burden on the Lord and he will sustain you. When we are focusing so much on things going on in our lives, all the negativity in the world, when we are so concerned about that and we have this unnecessary guilt and shame or fear, these aren't always just moral failings that we have, but they can be emotional loads that we haven't released yet. We haven't trusted in God enough yet to say, yeah, you take on these things I am feeling, and I'll trust in you to give me strength. So Jesus offers us this rest without giving us more responsibility. The new law he brought is giving us a chance to let go of baggage without taking on more responsibility of laws we have to follow and, to the letter. 1 John 5 verse 3, his commands are not burdensome. And Isaiah 30 verse 15 says, in repentance and rest is your salvation. We know that his yoke is easy. So when we take on burdens that he hasn't given, we're kind of resisting the kind of grace that he wants to give us. Now, it's human nature to not want to let go. It's, something that we all want to be, we all want to be in control of what's happening in our lives. I feel like it's the thing that most of us struggle with uh, the most is just to let go of what we are carrying. And it is a process to do so. It's not just an instant thing. 2 Corinthians 3, verse 18, we are being transformed gradually into his likeness. It's not an instant transformation. It is a gradual transformation. It takes time. And that's a good thing because we know that God will be understanding when we are taking time to complete this process. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 6, there's a time to keep and a time to throw away. If you're like me and you have to pack for a trip, your bag is going to be open on your bed and there's going to be a little bit of packing and then you unpack everything again and then you put in some new things and you take some other things out. And it's this, give and take kind of thing, going back and forwards to it. And, we might think, oh, I need everything, but God will gently show us what we need to leave behind. So don't be like me, where you go and pack 7 bags to the brim, to the max weight limit, and struggle with your journey, whether it's a physical one or your spiritual one. We need to learn to pack light. My third point is about this concept of what we have with us wherever we go. Nowadays, it's our phones. And it's quite interesting. This flight that we had now, we didn't really need a single piece of paper. We literally just needed our phones with us, and that could get us through all the way from getting to the airport, through security, through boarding, through the next flight, all the way to Scotland. And it's one of those things where, we feel kind of lost when we don't have our phones with us nowadays. But something that we should cling to on even more is obviously God, because he is with us wherever we go. Joshua 1 verse 9, God promises to be with Joshua wherever he goes. And in Psalm 139, we read that there is no way that we can flee from God's presence. Matthew 28, we read that he is with us always. God doesn't stay behind. When we traveled from South Africa to the UK now, my God isn't still in Cape Town. He is with me now. He was with me on the plane. He was with me, in the airport. He was with me the whole way through. And, he travels with us into every situation that we're in, into every season, into the unknown. There's no place that is God forsaken. People say, oh no, this place is God forsaken because there is, bad things happening there, or it's completely run down, or whatever the case is. But for us who walk with him, who are on this journey with him, there is no place like that. Whether you're in a hospital room, a boardroom, in an important meeting, a foreign country, or a painful season in your life, God is there. His presence isn't confined to a church building. He is the God who goes before us and he's beside us and he remains behind us. We are never alone on this faith journey. So that's the great thing. Just like our phones or things that we are so used to having on us all the time, God's presence is portable. Exodus 33, verse 14, my presence will go with you. In Psalm 23, David says, even in the valley, you are with me. So God doesn't wait for us at church. He goes with us, whether it's to work, school, home, and overseas. Our feelings, however, they don't always reflect this reality uh, that we always have God with us. Sometimes it's very easy for us to focus on what is seen and what is not unseen. Uh, it is one of those things, again, like I mentioned, when we get so distracted by the world, by our phones, by things happening around us, we very quickly forget that God is there and we can rely on Him instead of the worldly things. So we need to practice awareness. This is something that when traveling abroad is very important because if you aren't aware of what's going on around you, you can very quickly miss a turn because you're not used to the road you're on, or you can miss a flight because you forgot to change the time on your phone. We need to be aware. We need to be still and know that God is there and who He is and that He is there for us, like we read in Psalm 46. It's interesting how in Luke 24, verse 31 to 32, the disciples, they only recognized Jesus after He broke the bread. They needed a physical reminder of Him. And in that sense, sometimes we think God is absent simply because we haven't paused long enough to actually acknowledge His nearness in our lives. Quite recently, last week, when we arrived here first in Scotland, we didn't have SIM cards in our phones yet. So we were relying fully on Wi-Fi to be able to contact people, to be able to, access Google Maps, all those things, like I said. And there is nothing quite as overwhelming, I think, as when you're in a city that you don't know and you have no way to contact anyone or a way to find out how to get to where you need to be. And it's an interesting feeling where you can get so flustered and stressed out that you start, stressing out more, and then you start hyperventilating, and you start kind of losing sense of what is going on around you. And it's in those times where when we take a breath and we just take a moment to pray to God and calm ourselves, where God kind of comes in with reassurance and we can feel his presence because when we open our eyes again, we have this calmness and we know what we need to do to move forward. We can talk to someone or we can find an information center. So it is in those times where we are feeling kind of overwhelmed and lost. That's where God shows up, and we know that we need to rely on Him, especially when we are spiritually lost as well. So God is with us wherever we go on this faith journey that we are on. But fourthly, I've mentioned this earlier, this faith journey we're on, that is what I feel we actually have as our calling. Um, like there's two people who one person focuses on the destination, just wants to get there, and the other person focuses on the journey and says that's what's important to them is how they get there. We need to realize that whatever the case is, we don't have to arrive at our destination to be used by God. He uses us on the way. So this journey, it is already our mission calling, if you want to call it. It is already where we need to be preaching the gospel. A lot of us think, oh, when I get to that church that we're visiting, that is where I'm going to start preaching. Or when I get to the other country, that is where I'm going to start meeting people and sharing the gospel. But God uses us on the way. In scripture, most of ministry happened along the way. They happened in the detours and interruptions in those in-between moments. So in our lives, every conversation, every coffee, every time that we are driving or we are spending time with someone, that is a possible opportunity to share the gospel. The journey itself is this holy ground that we stand on with God presence where we can share his word with others around us. So this mission that we have, this calling we have to share God's glory, it's not the destination, it's not just the kingdom, it's the way that we live. Colossians 4, verses 5 to 6 says how we must make the most of every opportunity. We need to speak with grace. So, whatever we do, any conversation we have, we speak with the grace of God and show his character through it. In Luke 10, verses 1 to 3, Jesus sends his disciples ahead of him, not just to a final destination, but he says, just, walk ahead of me, spread the news of me coming as you go. Paul shared the gospel as he went, not just when he arrived at his destination. And interestingly enough, these opportunities that we have to share the gospel, they happen sometimes in the most mundane and unexpected or boring, times. Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch, I mean, they just had this encounter on the road. Jesus meets the Samaritan woman during a break at a well. In Acts chapter 8, Philip simply obeys and he meets a man whose life was changed. So when we are traveling, when we are on a layover, whether we are waiting in a queue, all of these things on our journey are mission fields that we can work in. What's nice though is God prepares both the messenger and the moment. It's not just on us to figure out where these opportunities are and where we're going to have to be to meet the right kind of people or, that kind of thing. God will prepare us, but also the moment that we need to be in. Esther, who is a remarkable woman in the Bible, she was prepared for a specific time to give a specific message. In Esther 4, verse 14, we read, it's for such a time as this. God prepared her for such a time as this. Ephesians 2, verse 10 says that we are created for good works prepared in advance. So we need to trust that when we have this faithful journey, that our obedience because of it will put us in the path of someone's need, someone that needs to hear the truth, someone that needs to hear the gospel, that they can be saved through the grace of Jesus. In the same way as we need to be, ready in the moments to be with, to share God's message with those around us, we need to also be interruptible. And what I mean by this is, if we think about the Good Samaritan, he stopped and he cared for the injured man. He was interruptible. He said, "Oh, I will interrupt what my plans were for the day, and I will care for this man." In Matthew 9, Jesus stops mid-journey on his way somewhere to heal the bleeding woman. So the Good Samaritan, he made an impact because he paused. Sometimes we're so busy rushing through life because, I need to get to my destination, that we're unaware of what God has actually put in front of us. What I like about traveling and being in the airport, or especially now when we're taking the bus some places, is there's always people around us. And I try to have casual conversations with people because everyone's got their own story to tell, and you never know who you might talk to. Maybe you can share something with them. Maybe they'll share something with you. Quite recently, in the slow lounge at the airport, was actually sitting to a man who was busy editing a video on his laptop, and I just mentioned that it looked like some really nice footage he got, and we started talking about what he does and who he is, and I found him on social media, and he is quite a well-known and sought-after lecturer on videography and photography, and it was amazing that just because I was willing to have a casual conversation with him, I managed to have some decent one-on-one time with this guy that most people would love to be able to get into a lecture room with, and he gets flown around the world to talk to people. So, in the same sense, we might be bringing something really impactful and important and life-changing to others just by having these casual conversations, just by being interruptible and being able to talk to others and having this strong faith that we are willing to share with others. So Life is a journey, and we can trust God even when the road is unclear. But we need to pack light and let go of what is weighing us down. But we know that we can trust that God is with us. We're never alone, even into the unknown when the destination is unclear. And the mission is the journey. Every step that we take in our life can be used by God. So I want to close with a verse before splitting into our discussion groups. And it's Proverbs 16, verse 9, that says, "In their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." I think that's quite a suitable verse that's in the Bible for us to close off with.